we'll start with you, James, and you can introduce yourself and your role at SiteMinder. You are Senior Director of the Global Ecosystem at SiteMinder.
That's correct. Thanks so much. And thanks to Mews, Matt and Richard for having me along, and look forward to this discussion. So SiteMinder is a global e-commerce platform for hotels. So we are very much focused on driving the bookings for hotels through the digital channels. SiteMinder as a company has been around about 15 years, we're hopefully a lot of the people here have had some experience with us over the years. My role at SiteMinder, or my team's role, is really looking at the markets that we serve and the markets that we want to serve, and making sure that we have the right partnerships in each of those regions, whether that be through distribution, through OTA, wholesaler, or through the hotel app store, integrating partners such as Revenate and others to hotels through our platform.
Great, thank you so much. Jens, do you want to introduce yourself and Pandox?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm Director of Distribution for Pandox. For those of you who don't know Pandox, it's a big hotel owner in Europe with some 150 properties. So I have a pretty cool job actually, because I'm looking after distribution for the operated part. And it's a bit unique because it includes several different brands as well as independent. So I get a lot of different perspectives of how different brands do their distribution and e-commerce, but also independent properties.
Yeah, no, I think you're on the knife's edge of this topic, as the expression goes, so you'll have a lot to contribute. And Hank, last but not least, MD of Europe of Revenate.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. Happy to join here. My name is Hank Adriaans. I'm running the EMEA office for Revenate. Revenate's a company that's been in business for over 10 years. We started off as reputation management and survey management, but now we've moved into this area called direct booking and getting the direct bookings for hotels. And we do that with a CRM that most people know and that we've worked with Mews with on a number of customers. And on top of that, we're building out our solutions with some recent acquisitions. Last acquisitions we did was a voice sales channel, and the latest one is Go Moment, which means we are now multi-channel, so you can choose the channel of choice to communicate with your guests. So very excited to be here. I'm very excited also to talk about the things that we have on our plate.
This is great. It's great to have you guys all with us. Matt, do you want to start with the first topic, and then I'll jump in with the second?
Yeah, so obviously we're looking at tools here and how can you enable that direct booking, and it is the holy grail. And I think we saw a spike during the pandemic of direct bookings if you looked at the percentage, but it's also because I think a lot of OTAs pulled back on their advertising, and then naturally hotels were winning. But what can hotels do to retain that spike that they had? We saw in our data that it was between 30 to 40% of bookings came direct, which is way higher than what we saw before. But what should hoteliers do to retain that when the OTAs now start to spend heavily again? James, hit us.
Oh, thanks so much. And you're right. Look, we saw very similar data, or certainly we saw the increasing trend through a lot of the direct channels. And just to cover that off quickly, yes, a lot of it is OTAs and other channels pulling back or having fewer resources through that period. Also, the type of guest that was able to travel in that period was domestic leisure, which does tend to be, if a high percentage of all of your bookings are domestic leisure, you're going to find that direct is going to make up a larger percentage than previously, purely because it is more aligned with that type of traveler and that type of booking. But I think that's a really important lesson, in that when we're looking to drive direct bookings, is really understanding who are the guests that are more likely to be booking direct, and how do we reach out and how do we attract them to our property. And we can all throw marketing money at any campaign. But one of the key things is understanding that where we're making those marketing investments is in the right part of our process and is in the right place to attract the right guests. So one of the key things I think it's important to focus on for hotels is to get a true understanding of that direct booking funnel. And I've always looked at it in kind of three parts in terms of traffic in the internet to your website, traffic from your website to your booking engine, and then critically, they're all critical, but then most critically, traffic from your booking engine turning into bookers, so lookers to bookers. And if you don't know which part of that journey, if you don't know your conversion in each of those parts of the journey, then it's very hard to really create a strategy to improve your direct booking. You might find that your booking engine is converting a crazy amount of visitors to your booking engine into direct bookings, but yet you still have very low bookings. And without actually looking at the data, you might think, well, my booking engine isn't much good because I'm not getting the direct bookings that everyone else is talking about. You go and you change your direct booking engine and you've got the same problem, if not worse, because actually the problem was you're getting a ton of traffic to your website, but your website's not actually driving those to your booking engine, or worse, you're not actually getting the traffic to your website. So, if most of us as hoteliers, or most hoteliers, are not experts in digital marketing, and that's where I think it's really critical to involve partners, be that digital marketing experts or even productized solutions that are doing that marketing role for you and attracting the right guests with the right messages to your website and giving you the data in terms of the conversion. So the traffic to your brand and what's actually ending up in your hotel, and take the learnings from the last 18 months, to see exactly what type of guests are traveling at what time, so that you're helping yourself or whichever marketing agency or product that you might be using through a partnership to direct your marketing towards the right type of guests.
Love that. I love how you talk about the funnel. I think in hotels we'll open Google Analytics once every so often, but it needs to be a science that you follow religiously and report on every month. And in Mews, we do that, right? We obsess with the volumes of people coming into the website, but then, well, where do we lose them? How much time do they spend on the website? Do they go into the booking engine? Do we then lose them at the bottom of the funnel? But by actually drawing a funnel and I'm writing those numbers on and iteratively looking at it and saying, maybe the booking engine is converting great, but actually I'm not getting enough people in the website. So maybe there's a spending issue. And then you go to a technology partner and see who can help you. But you've got to start. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And I think the first step has to be measuring. Totally.
Yeah, and I see similarities between driving direct business or business to hotels in any way to any other business like SiteMinder or Mews in terms of driving our own business. Everything we do is measured. We know exactly how many hotels we speak to and how many demonstrations we do to how many sales we get, and we know where we can improve it in each situation. And I think and it's the same with any kind of retail business such as Amazon or otherwise. And these are really simple metrics that there's great tools to be able to look at. You don't have to be a massive business to really understand that new business funnel that's driving the greater value to your business.
And Jens, you're in the hotel space and you've got brands, but you also got independent hotels. Are you seeing that either or are doing better right now on the direct booking, and what are you learning from that?
So I would say, first of all, our from the owner perspective, I wouldn't say that like the statement that direct traffic or direct booking is the holy grail. I'd say more, for us, the starting point is more, what's the cost of acquisition for a specific booking? So if we, for instance, know that an average OTA booking will cost us 15%, then we know also that it doesn't make more sense to spend more than 50% to drive that booking through our direct direct channels. So I think like that type of a mindset also helps us then in our marketing planning to understand, okay, because it's true also what James said about kind of understanding the funnel is that a lot of the business that, let's say, we do marketing for, that's middle or lower funnel already. So and I think unless you're on a let's say on a high destination level and you have a huge group of hotels that you're promoting, I'd say for single properties, it's let's say the role of doing destination marketing or let's say advertising for incremental business is very difficult. It's very difficult to get a return on investment on. So the way that kind of we work is more to see, okay, we have obviously our short-term revenue goals, which we need to achieve, and then have a very clear understanding of what cost of acquisition is per channel. So I would say it's more of that. To come to your question on whether that the brands or independents are doing better, it depends on it really depends on what stage you are in the market. I would say, like in general, with transaction cost to the brand, with franchise, and with, let's say, loyalty costs, I would say they're pretty equal. I'd say, of course, bigger brands have a bigger share. Let's say the big ones due to the brand recognition. But certain, let's say regional brands that we work with, they don't necessarily have a higher brand, let's say a brand contribution than independents have, since they have more flexibility and they can do a little bit cooler campaigns and things like that.
I really liked where you talked about the cost of the booking, and I think that's such a smart way to approach it. So do you then think, Booking.com 18 to 20% commission? So I am willing to pay 18 to 20% in search engine optimization, search engine marketing for direct. Is that like the percentage that you hold, or are you actually below that percentage?
So like we look at it in two ways, right? Like in order to calculate the cost per channel, we have the direct acquisition cost. So like which is great. Like, I mean, we can track how much we're spending in paid search, and we can track how much our meta search clicks costs. And then, of course, you have other things like the infrastructure, right? Like the website cost, the booking engine cost, so which are more like what, the fixed costs, the ones that a bit cannot be directly associated to a channel. But I'll say, like, in general, I'd say if we're running campaigns which we know are specifically lower, or let's say lower or mid funnel, I'd say it's vital, and I think every hotel should do that, it's vital to have, let's say, your OTA commission as your benchmark, because I mean, you're not driving additional bookings, you're shifting bookings between channels. And I think that's at least that is a mindset that we have when we look at it. And then yes, there's a cost, and when we do include it in the total, but certain costs, of course, are very difficult to attribute to one channel. I mean, your brand website will help your entire ecosystem.
Thank you, love that. Hank, you're on the CRM side, so everything you do is about driving direct booking. So yeah, share what should hotels do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And direct bookings is in the heart of in the midst of our hearts, in the midst of our minds all day, because we are pushing the direct bookings for a hotel. And for us, it all starts with understanding your guest and understanding the data of your guests, right? I think that has come up a couple of times already during the day. And that's where we also start. I think getting this one unique guest database in place where you have all the data combined from any source that you have where there's data, because this is still dispersed throughout many systems in the hotels, and getting that all into one spot where you understand the guest and have a clear view on who that guest is and what he's done for you and what he's done with you, that will enable you to send the right message to the right person at the right time. And I think if the last 18 months have learned us something, is that we need to know that and need to act upon that very quickly with the changing rules and the changing market conditions that we've had. So if you have that, you will be agile and you can switch quickly, and you can say, okay, I now need to focus on domestic. So let me find my domestic guests and start campaigning against those, because anything else doesn't make sense, because people will not be able to come, right? So having that is the starting point of everything, and then sort of actioning that data and doing that in a very sophisticated way that is to a high degree still automated. And again, I think a lot of people think automation means depersonalization, which is not the case, right? If you do the right segmentation, you can have automated messaging and campaigning going out without it not being personalized. It can be very personalized, and it can be sent the right message to the right person at the right time. And I think that also sort of talks to the staff shortages that we currently see in the industry, where you see that a lot of hands are needed and a lot of people are screaming for people. And whatever you can automate will help alleviate that demand and also help people focus on things that are more meaningful, right? If you look at something like Revenate, we just acquired Go Market. And one of the things that we got as part of that was a digital concierge. One example they shared with us, the digital concierge at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas is sharing the Wi-Fi password 800 times a week, right? That's 800 calls to the front desk. What's the Wi-Fi password? So those kind of things make sense if you can automate it and have still a good service to your guest. And being actionable and being on top of that and understanding what your guest database is, what your segments are, what the guests are that you're trying to reach out to and what you want to get, and having a system that supports that easily. And you can do that in a very quick way and switch gears as needed, I think will dramatically increase the importance of your direct channel. And on the cost of acquisition, which is a favorite topic of ours, because typically if you're using a system like Revenate, you're looking at single-digit cost, even sub 5% cost of whatever booking you get. And with having the direct connection to the PMS, we can very clearly tell you what the return on investment is of any campaign that you have. So having that insight and making you see what marketing can do and what it can generate for you, I think is something that hotels are looking for, and anyone we talk to is in for that.
So probably makes sense to move to this discussion about the OTAs, but I have to say, I want to respond to something that Jens said and say that I think you and our CFO at Mews have been chatting, because I'm being measured the exact same way, which is on customer acquisition costs. So I know that you and Pavla are talking, but that's why I love this session. I think, this is really getting into the heart of how we do acquisition and how we make sure it's as optimized as possible. And given the volatility that's still going on in the industry, this is just really, really timely. So why don't we switch to the role of the OTAs? And Jens, I'll start with you on this one, because I think as the hotelier here and as somebody who is on revenue, I think I'm curious to know how has their role changed over the past year, or is changing, or has it changed at all? And what role do you think that they're playing right now for your organization?
Well, in general, I have to say, like, I'm one of those few hoteliers which don't think that OTA is the enemy. So I've always kind of had a more of a let's say practical approach to how we can work together, and I think there's lots of value in working with the OTAs. Now, with that said, there's lots of there's lots of frustration. I also think, like, during this time, I hear, at least from hotels, that certain let's say ways of working or certain rollouts during the pandemic might not have been as popular among hoteliers as hoped. Let's say it's the more of the the customer centric approach, where the customer is the guest and not the hotel. So I think I'll just give one example which I found interesting. So it might be that I missed that completely, but we joined a program called risk-free reservations. Actually, we didn't join it for hotels actively. It was auto opted in, which is the case many times, which among hotels is not very popular. I think brands are normally protected since it's kind of opted out on a brand level, but independent small hoteliers are normally just auto opted into the programs. So the risk-free reservations program is which is marketed as basically something very positive. It's a no-brainer. It basically says that if you are selling a non-refundable rate, instead of charging the guest when he cancels, let us find another guest for you, which sounds good so far. And then they say, well, if we don't find another guest, we will refund you the amount. That this is what the OTA says. And then we found out later on that what actually happens is that when that guest cancels, they will sit on the rate if it's a long, let's say a long lead time, and wait until prices increase. And when the public price has increased, they'll sell that lower rate and then they'll win the booking. So that's the replacement, undercutting rates. So again, I mean, these are just examples of how it's difficult sometimes to maintain, I mean, terms and condition wise, this is what we accepted and signed. We didn't actually sign it, we were opted in, but like this kind of, that they did what they said they would do. But it's a very, let's say, it's not a straightforward, it's not a transparent way of working. And you know, there are more examples, and I know probably you guys on the call also know there are different ways. So I think that's just an example, I think, of how it has created some frustration. But I think in general, I think the cooperation and the partnership with them is more important than ever. I don't see that there will be a. We did see during the pandemic that we had, to a certain extent, more direct, which was positive. But I don't see a huge shift in ways of working once we kind of get back to normal. Like we see that kind of stabilizing again, and for both for branded and independent properties, OTAs remains a very important channel. And you can pretty much say that if you're not maintaining good visibility and positioning, you have a big revenue risk once the market picks up. That's just the case. And especially now, certain segments are not booking. Corporates are pretty much, at least, you know, long haul corporates are out. There's no group business. So what you have left is pretty much, let's say, online retail.
Yeah.
So that I think will remain, and then that's something that you know, hotels need to keep their focus on.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's interesting. And James, do you want to jump in on the role of the OTAs? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I always like talking about it. And I mean, obviously, I do advocate a very balanced sort of distribution mix, and agree with a lot of what Jens says, especially around obviously cost of acquisition. You can throw everything into direct. There's no point if it's going up and over what you would be paying for that elsewhere. Theoretically, although that guest is, I mean, they do tend to be a higher value of guests coming through direct. But if we get onto what we've seen over the last 18 months is actually quite a change in the distribution mix for a lot of hotels, and especially across Europe, where it's a lot more fragmented. We see typically hotels in this region are connected with more channels, and they have a requirement to be connected with more channels. They do more wholesale, and how those different types of channels have changed behavior over, you know, the last couple of years has been interesting to see. So actually, we're seeing that hotels are working with additional channels that they particularly wouldn't be working with previously. Not just new OTAs, but you know, different types of distribution channels also. And
that's something that's here to stay. That's not just it's something that should continue going forward. This isn't just a momentary thing or a response to the pandemic.
I think initially it was a response to the pandemic, and actually we saw groups of properties going either way. You saw those saying, look, I'm actually going to turn off a whole bunch of channels because they're not going to be sending me anything, and I don't have the time to manage that relationship right now. I don't have the staff to manage that relationship right now. Whereas, you know, you'll see in other segments of the industry where they're like, well, let's try and get whatever demand there is. And you know, we've had a lot of conversations with hotels and put together a lot of sort of tools and playbooks, which kind of helps to steer them in the direction of what's going to be driving them something different to what their existing distribution is doing today. And obviously we've seen success from the domestic retail type channels, who are still, picking up additional properties and driving additional value. So, as long as those channels have been adding value, I don't see that changing as it goes back to normal. And I think you've got to have a look at the booking behaviors of guests as well. They have been booking differently. They have been booking through different channels. One particularly, is that Airbnb as a distribution channel has was probably the only one that had a very nice V-shaped recovery and grown even further, and you can see that in their own reported numbers. And looking at that, it's not purely vacation rental stuff. Like, there's a lot of hotel inventory in there as well, and hotels coming off the back of that doing really well. So I can see those types of channels actually providing additional value to more property types going forward.
And it's interesting to hear it's also potentially a way of diversifying the strategy and de-risking having, all of your eggs in just a couple of baskets, as the expression goes.
Yeah, I believe so. And look, I think there's still some consolidation to come from the OTAs, and I think obviously as we see additional waves and new variants approaching us now, businesses that were looking like they were scraping out of this may very well be acquired by larger ones, and that's not always to the benefit of hotels, as larger players are looking to gain a little bit more cornerstone in new markets, and so it kind of reduces the distribution options per hotel. I think that there's still a great amount of opportunity out there to kind of broaden the distribution. When I look at the distribution mix in the hotels that are using SiteMinder, and I can see what they're missing out on, and when we're giving that kind of data to our teams to help those hotels to have a refreshed strategy, I think it is still very positive, and I can see that those are definitely going to be. I would like to see that those smaller ones are taking a fairer share of that market.
That's interesting. And Hank, how do you feel about it from your perspective and from your organization? What's your view on the OTAs right now?
Yeah, absolutely. OTAs are here and they're here to stay, I think, for some time, right? They're not going to go away, and there's different channels that people will try out and try to be successful through. For us, if you look at it from the perspective of a CRM and sort of the holy grail of getting the direct booking, what we are saying is, yes, all these channels will give you some new incremental business, right? That you cannot get yourself directly. So that's great to do. But once you have that guest through one of those channels, you need to do everything possible to make that next booking of that guest direct. You now have the relationship, you now have the data, do whatever you can to capture as much data as you can from that guest by Wi-Fi password, interaction with the guest, or whatever you want to use to capture more data, and then use that data to start marketing to that guest. So the next time that he comes or is anticipating on coming to your property, you get him an offer to book direct and do a direct booking, because not only will there be more money on the table left for you because you're not paying that high premium, but secondly, you're starting to own that relationship. And I think that's also important, having that relationship and starting to work with that guest directly. So for us, OTAs are sort of top of the funnel when it comes to looking at it from a CRM perspective, and they are here to stay, and you should have a good mix. But as soon as you have a guest come through one of those channels, you should do everything possible to make the next booking direct.
Like, do you have tools to capture the guest email address? Obviously, more and more OTAs are now blinding out the email addresses, and those get disabled 15 days, I think, after departure. But that is such a critical piece to the puzzle, right?
Absolutely. And there's a lot you can do pre-arrival there, right? Once you have the booking, you can start reaching out and you can start asking them, hey, thank you for booking with our hotel. Tell us a little bit more about yourself so we can make your stay as enjoyable as possible. And in that process, you can capture data, you can capture preferences, you can capture so many things that you know about that guest. And if you start enriching your guest database with that, that means that you now are building that relationship yourself. And in that steps, you can really find out all kinds of things and also capture that direct email address while you're interacting with that guest. And that will boost your direct channel, because the richer your database is, the better your conversion, and then the more detailed and personalized your campaigns will be.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like we see it at Mews, when we have the guest email address, the chance that they'll check in online is 1 in 3. If we don't have the email address, if it's one of those booking.com, it's 1 in 10. Yeah. So when you capture the direct booking, it's great because you see this spike of online check-ins driving lots of automation. But if they've gone through all the filters of booking.com, they strip out the URLs, the experience just isn't the experience that you build. So it's, I think, really capture as soon as possible the email. We do it during online check-in when we see that they've come into the journey. We're like, oh, that, you know, we recognize the booking.com email and we ask them to change it and then to verify that thing. But that's only on the online check-in. But you need to have a way to capture that also once they check in. That's what Daniel posted in the chat. When you have a check-in, yes, you still need to try and capture that in some smart way without being intrusive to the guest experience. But it is so vital that you build a database of email addresses and that you link them to the guest profile and that you have that data to then allow your CRMs to work with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, if you look at all the data that you have in your systems, it's hard to sort of put it all together and say, hey, here's a guest that booked through an OTA, the booking.com, here's one that booked through Expedia, and here's one that booked direct. How will you find out that that's the same guest, right? And that's where also a CRM comes in, where you start sort of normalizing, standardizing, and deduping your data and making sure that you don't only compare based on first name, last name, and email address, but lose all the data fields that you have. So you say, hey, yeah, they use various channels, but it's the same map that's coming to our hotel, and he used 5 channels to do that. But in fact, he's much more valuable to us than we think he is based on the single bookings that we saw with all these various email addresses.
We should probably have a whole other session at some point on CRM strategies within hospitality. That would be a great topic to have. Yeah.
Agree.
Do you want to take the last one, Matt?
Yeah, so Google's come into space a few months, or they've been in the space, they've been trying, and then there was this big announcement about travel, what they're doing. But really, I haven't really seen a huge impact on our side. The integration hasn't been phenomenally picked up, and it's not working that well. Are you seeing different trends on your sides? Are they really having a major impact in the hotels? And suddenly there's been a shift of, I don't think the answer is yes, but have you seen any shift in business mix towards a direct from the Google channel? And I'll start with Jens. You probably know the answer to this.
So you're referring probably to the organic listings and
Correct.
Google Travel.
Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, there were some studies I think made. I think Mirai made one, and like we were not able to see it, and so you know, we couldn't see. Also, to our tech partner, we were not able to at least 1 or 2 of them. They weren't able to give us the data. So there we go. So pretty blind, but like, you know, overall, we didn't see a big, I think, improvement there. But I think, like in general, the kind of the field around Google and how they're, you say, changing the way that let's say hotels show up in search results is exciting. I mean, there's so much happening there, and you know, if you just have to make a search for a Google search for a hotel or a destination, and you'll just see like the whole, let's say the whole above the fold area is now, you know, specifically tailored to hotels. I mean, you got your, you know, either you have your My Business account, or you have rates for that specific hotel, or you even have like a mini carousel of hotels with rates. So I mean, completely new, let's say, ways of that Google now is also monetizing, of course, on that. And I mean, we have seen for years that our search budgets are shifting towards meta search, which is natural. I think, because they're you know, going, people are clicking, you know, where it's intuitive to click, and not on the paid search text ads anymore. So I think that that's exciting, and I think that in general the environment of Google Travel, in the same way that Google Flights has kind of been there for a while, I think that in general, normally Google is quite good at what they do. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to continue. People are going to use let's say those tools to do their research, and I mean, and they can pretty much do everything now from that they can do on a review site or an OTA. Generally, I don't think that necessarily Google will go all the way and become an OTA. I think they can monetize well enough through their, let's say, meta search and that side of things. But yeah, I mean, if you look at also flights today, it's pretty advanced, and you can pretty much do everything on your booking until the last step, which is e-commerce. So I wouldn't be surprised if it continues in that way. And I think an interesting opportunity for hotels is, I mean, this is happening, right? And are we focusing enough in terms of like optimization in that environment, right? Like before, I think my business, Google My Business, which is actually powering now the hotel kind of account on Google, it has been a little bit neglected. It's something you set up and then it's there. But I mean, now it's not only like your let's say information box. This is your listing. This is where you put your facilities. This is how everything will show up. Like so I think that for the digital marketeers, I think that's I mean, it's local search, right, in a way. So I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
James, I'm sure you have an opinion on this.
I do, yeah. And look, Jens has picked up quite a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of questions there. I'm not sure which one you want to answer, but in terms of the organic listings within the meta, look, I don't think, I certainly didn't expect that to suddenly be a monumental change in the transactions for hotels, but it's certainly a real indication of intent there from Google in terms of getting more content, getting better content, and getting hotels to be more serious about hotels on Google. As Jens said, the actual listing piece, or your Google My Business has become a listing, and it is really important to be managing that. Google reviews is becoming the de facto go-to place for consumer research. And I only realized myself, I think early this year, that subconsciously I've switched to Google. I suddenly realized that I'm out and about. I hadn't been out much, but I found myself out and about, and I wanted to find some information on something, and I go to my phone. I suddenly realized, blimey, I'm doing all of this on Google. Like I would have normally gone to TripAdvisor, or even when searching hotels, 18 months ago, I would have found myself on Trivago, but actually I'm not. I'm doing it here. So, the whole experience does start again with the consumer. And that is that's what drives the change, is if you change the consumer behavior. And Google is the first port of call for so many people in terms of research on anything travel, that the more in front of you they can get it, the more adoption they're going to get, and the more relevant they will become. Actually, we've seen, I think that being present on Google to being bookable on Google is two separate things. And being present means you have to manage your profile within that Google My Business. You have to be updating your images. You can have guests upload their own images as well. So you have to be mindful of it, and you have to be responding to those reviews. And secondly, being bookable through Google, I think is, almost a must do now for the vast majority of hotels. And it's not a difficult thing to do. There's platforms like ourselves, and I'm sure many other partners who do it as a CPA. So cost per acquisition, you don't have to start running campaigns and worry about what days, what stays I'm going to be bidding on, and this, that, and the other. Meta sort of 10 years ago was a fairly scary place. And you had to make a lot of decisions in terms of investment and where you're putting that. Now it's a lot easier for just about any hotel to be able to be bookable and be present in in that environment.
Yeah, there's no excuse really now. With the CPA model, I think also that a lot of the tech providers offer, you kind of, you can connect and you're kind of in the environment, and you'll get bookings that are coming in at a lower rate than the OTA commissions. I think from that perspective, it's, if you're working with someone who has the connectivity, there's really no excuse not to be on, because that is just good for you.
I had a sneak peek on our Slido, and there's a few good questions there. So I think it might actually be good to flip over to our Slido and see what's in there. We've got 50 minutes left on this call today. And
I may make one remark
Yeah.
when it comes to Google and Google reviews. Google reviews are more and more important. That is the de facto channel that people will go to, consumers will go to research where they go and what they think of the hotels and get an opinion on them. I think a lot of hotels are leaving out by not using their surveys to push and syndicate them into Google reviews. And that's, I think, where still a lot can be done, because the more and the better reviews you have on there, the better it will be for you. And that's something that people should look into. Let's syndicate the surveys, the post-day surveys that you send out, and make sure that you automatically push those to Google reviews, which is something that we and other vendors provide.
Nice, thank you. There's a question here: how impactful is direct booking on Google? Which I guess we've answered. We don't know yet. It's like the jury is out.
Yeah.
What's the estimated time of investment in Mews bringing back this integration? So that integration was actually built by Google towards our API, and they're having a few challenges with the way that it's built, because currently, if we've got a few hundred hotels on this, but the moment one hotel goes out of parity, they switch up all of them, because they need to investigate the parity situation. So we're trying to convince them to have a look if we can rebuild this, because it doesn't make sense, right, that all of the hotels get punished for the parity of one of our customers. So that's one of the things we're looking into. I don't know the ETA, to be honest, off the top of my head, but it's one of the hot topics that we have internally. So I'll be sure to ping Xenia, but you are anonymous. So if you want to ping me or someone at support, I'm sure that they can connect you to me, and I can give you a better estimated time of arrival. How do you work with an OTA that undercuts your direct rates using the commission you pay, but you need to work with it because the market monopoly it has? Jens, I guess you broached on this.
Yeah. So, well, since it's mentioned monopoly, I guess it's Expedia and Booking.com that's referred to. So, well, first of all, I think you shouldn't accept it. I think that's the main thing. Like this is also no go for us. Like we have as a policy rate parity as a policy, which means we give everybody the same rates. That's it. And whether it's private or public. So so there are a few things that you can do. Like the first thing is, of course, that when you say that they use the commission, in order for them to do that, they need to take the payment, right? Otherwise, they can't do it. So check if you have online payments activated. If you deactivate it, normally they can't do it. So that's one of the easy tricks, which we use a lot. I think on Expedia, you're not able to do that, but they're also programmed. Like, they're quite sneaky in the way of getting like the rates. So if you're really talking about Expedia and Booking, go in and check, like just go through the screens. There's something called like competitive rate program on Expedia where you can also deactivate this. And that was something rolled out in the middle of the pandemic. They rolled out new terms and conditions where at least all independent hotels were opted in automatically into competitive rate matching, which is just unacceptable actually, without giving more information around it. But that's also one of the things that they do. So there are ways to do it. I think so on online payments, and then check whether there's somewhere on the extranet where you can actually opt out of these programs.
Yeah, I think it's also a matter of strategy and timing, right? I think if you look at it from a CRM perspective, we would always say go direct first, right? And not go OTA first. I think that's also something to consider. When am I putting what out there and at what price? And I think that's also something to be very aware of and find the right mix. And what we would do from a CRM perspective is go direct first and then activate the other channels. I think that's probably the best strategy from a CRM perspective.
We have another question. What do you all think about how Booking.com has publicly stated to its partners that it will cannibalize commissions to ensure rate disparity in their favor? I guess it's linked to this, but James, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, not too much, to be honest.
Milk it for what it's worth.
Yeah. It's guest first, right? That's the policy. It's the customer first from their perspective, and us hoteliers, I mean, we feel that actually we are the customers because we're actually the ones that are paying them. So you could have that argument, but yeah, normally it comes down to like every decision, everything that they do is customer centric, guest centric. Whether it's right or wrong, it's a different discussion.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important that you start owning more of that relationship yourself as a hotelier, right? Going direct means you start owning that relationship, and booking has less of an impact on that relationship. So that's why the direct channel is so important in the strategy of a hotel. Once you start owning more of that direct relationship with your guest, that's where the OTA, they're still important, but they will become less important. Let's put it like that.
And Henk, like, how long does it take? They take Revenate, they start doing the advertisement. How long does it take before a hotel really sees a return on investment? Because I'm guessing you need to build up a database, you need to start communicating. At which point do they actually really see the impact of it?
It's months, 3 to 4 months when they see the first results, because the data is there, but it's just not actionable. We need to pull it out of the PMS. We need to pull it out of all the other source systems, and then do our magic with our data engine, where you get a clear view of all those guest profiles and then start campaigning against them. But we've many examples where within 3 to 4 months, people say, wow, this is generated not tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands of direct business for me, because I've actioned now on my data that I have already in all these systems, but I haven't used it. I haven't looked at it. I haven't activated it. I haven't sent out the right campaigns to the right people at the right time. But when they start doing it, it's a pretty quick return on investment.
I like this question next. I don't know what the answer is, but maybe you know. Our hotel was OTA free before COVID, which I think is fantastic if you can achieve that and be successful. But during COVID, they had to sign up with one to get some of that business in. At which point can they cut them off again? Does anyone, like, I think it's great. But
I think, well, obviously, technically, of course, you can stop working with any of your partners. I mean, depending on an agreement you have, I don't know which partner you signed up with, which OTA, but theoretically, with them these days, it's all dynamic. So you're not under any obligation to give them inventory, so you can just close it out. Now, whether you'll be able to, or or whether you're going to continue to require to need them post-COVID is an actual different question.
yeah.
But the fact that you have that experience already in terms of being able to drive direct booking, be that through repeat business, which we see a lot of in thankfully, certainly in this country, or whether it was new business direct or through Facebook, through social media, however you were managing it. I know there are properties out there that can do it, and those repeat guests weren't coming back in the summer, so you've got to fill it up from somewhere. The most important thing is your data. So if you want any chance of going back to that sort of environment that you were in pre-COVID, is that you continue to communicate with those guests that you were relying on pre-COVID, and you continue to get your value proposition across to them. And yes, and maybe you might be able to wean yourself off. But I don't know when post-COVID is, or when post-COVID is even going to start. So it's important to maintain that contact.
It's about removing the emotion from the arguments, right? So there's very strong, not necessarily positive emotions around OTAs, but when you step away from it and when you look at that cost, like Jens was talking about, if it makes sense for your business and it's the same cost, if not cheaper, stick with it. And you're running your own business, and booking doesn't necessarily have those emotions. So you shouldn't have those emotions towards them, and just think like a business person and look at your cost at the bottom line, and that should be the driver for the decision. If obviously you're running a CSR business and you have strong emotions about these things, then definitely go with what your feeling tells you. But if you're running a business for profit, look at the bottom line and what makes most sense for the business, even though it's sometimes hard to swallow.
Yeah, I think that, in general, it's acceptable to say that your cost of acquisition goes up during the pandemic. I mean, that's also something like we have said, okay, we can also make decisions which are based on, keeping a very, let's say, strong focus on getting the efficiency high. But we also realize, during this time, and we might have to accept not being as efficient. As long as it generates net revenue for us, as long as it has a positive impact on bottom line, we might have to pay a little bit more. So I think that's pretty much what the concept is here, right? Like, okay, but I guess, the moment you see that your hotel is able to fill up with direct bookings, that's when you turn them off. That's it. And I mean, then you could argue that, I would argue that, if you keep the OTAs live, you might be able to yield your rates higher and people will be able to pay more. But, if I guess the moment where you see, okay, demand is back, presumably you were happy with the amount of revenue you could generate with brand web before. When you come back to that stage, that you can kind of close the tap.
There's a question around wholesalers that work through OTAs and then jump through hoops once the booking is made to make the adjustments, and how does that affect customer service? I don't actually know. Do we have a specialist on this that feels strongly?
So I guess, I just know, I thought about one example where, let's booking made on Agoda, booking.com rates, and came into the system as hotel beds. So it's completely confusing. So like this, and so we kind of made that. So I like, there are a lot of those examples, right, of things happening, and I think, is it good for customer service? No, of course not. Like we don't know. We had no idea that booking was made on Agoda, let's say at front office when that guest arrived. Like you just don't know. And the less you know about the guest, the less, obviously, the less personalized service you can give. So I think, that is there, and that's obviously something we want to prevent from happening. Will it stop? I'm not sure, but yeah, it's not. I wouldn't say it's not good for customer service.